I can hear you.
Mylan, can you test your mic again, please? Mylan, we didn't hear you at all. Can you try again, please?
Excuse me, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Reconvene the meeting. I call for a motion and a second to reconvene.
Motion.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion so carried. At this point, Brian, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Call the roll.
Mr. Murphy?
Present.
Mrs. Mallon? Present. Mrs. Kennedy?
Present.
Dr. Adams?
Present.
Mrs. Napolitano-Furno?
Present.
Mrs. Hutchinson? Mr. Hauser?
Present.
Mrs. Poppy?
Present.
And we have Mrs. Augulus joining us via Zoom.
Okay, we move on to minutes. I call for a motion and a second to accept the minutes of the December 14, 2021 Board of Ed meeting. Motion? I'll motion. Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion so carried.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to move on to policy. I call for a motion and a second to approve the second reading and adoption of the policies as presented. Gender neutral public comment at board meetings, agenda preparation and dissemination, and student gifts and solicitations. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
so carried.
Aye.
New, school board access to information and reports. Do I need motion? I didn't say that.
That's still part of.
I know, but I didn't say it. Should I say, I just figured I better write, you know.
I think it's okay because it's part of the.
Okay. I call for a motion and a second to accept the first reading of the policies as presented. 1400, 1420, 4000, 4010, 4317, and 4318. Motion? I'll motion. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion so carried. I call for a motion to accept the first reading, waive the second reading, and adopt immediately revised policy. 9260. I need a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion so carried. Okay, we're going to go on to discussion items. Student government report. They're not here? Okay. The budget guidelines. Mr. Hauser?
Give me one moment and I will have that up for you.
And just so I can let everyone know, I'm going to hand out a packet for everybody up at the dais here. Okay, good evening. Each year, school districts typically start a budget process around the January time period, and that culminates with a public vote in May. So tonight, I wanted to start off with our first budget presentation for the following school district, which is the 2022-2023 school year, which will begin this July 1st, 2022, and the school year will go through the following June 30th, 2023. So this first screen that I have here really just an outline of the brief agenda and the items that I want to discuss for the board and for the public. Next slide, please. So here you can see a guideline and in chronological order the steps that the district typically takes to get us to a point where we evaluate the budget based on guidelines that the board adopts, and then we go through a sequence of looking at revenues, looking at reserve funds, discussing the New York State tax levy. We go into staffing programs, and then we look at expenditures, and then down towards March 22nd, we do a final review of the expenditures and the revenues as well as the reserves. We tie that into the New York State Legislature's final school aid estimate that they provide to us. And then in April, the board adopts the budget. On May 10th, we actually have a public budget hearing. And then the finale would be May 17th, would be the actual budget vote that also ties in with the school board election. Any questions on that? Okay, so I'm just going to go through the budget guidelines, and these are in draft format right now. These are the guidelines that were adopted for the current 2021-22 school year. I have not made any changes, but I think it's important that we focus on these guidelines because this is what will drive a lot of the decision-making as we build this proposed budget. So just in summary here, the Board of Education is committed to a proposed budget that limits the tax levy, and the tax levy is the amount of money that the district raises from the residential homeowners as well as the commercial entities. And that's used to calculate the tax levy cap for the 2022-23 school year. The Connecticut School District has typically or has always stayed within the New York State tax levy cap, which I believe was adopted for the 2011-12 school year, almost 10 years ago. So the guidelines that I've listed below, and there are many of them, are based on anticipated state and federal aid figures, some of which have been provided and others that we are still waiting to come in. Next slide, please. Okay, so educational programs and services. Existing educational programs and services shall be maintained at current levels of services with continued flexible class size caps in all grades. All educational programs and services shall be examined for efficiency with alterations made as possible. Vacant positions will not be filled unless necessary to maintain critical program components. Changes in staffing will be contingent upon enrollment and programmatic need. Expenditure cap and the tax levy. By January 25th, the administration will prepare a preliminary 2022-23 tax levy cap calculation. In March, administration will prepare for review and deliberation by the board a preliminary 2022-23 budget, total expenditure of which shall not exceed the preliminary calculated tax levy cap. The final tax levy cap will be calculated on or before March 1st. That's a deadline set by the Office of the State Comptroller. A separate preliminary 2022-23 contingency budget will also be provided by the end of March. Next slide. A multi-year budget plan. The development and ultimate approval of the 2022-23 budget shall continue to be based on a multi-year budget plan in which any single year budget shall not stand alone as a traditional school budget, but shall be treated as both the second year of the current 5-year budget plan and the first year of an ensuing 5-year budget plan. Accordingly, the administration shall develop and demonstrate wherever possible the interdependence of specific budget decisions relative to the 2022-23 budget as such decisions relate to the subsequent budgets in the 5-year budget plan. In its deliberation, the board will give particular attention to reviewing the implications of all decisions as they impact on all budgets covered by the 5-year plan. All budgetary decisions will be guided by the goals of long-term tax stability and the continuous improvement of educational quality. Fund balances and our reserves. The 2022-23 budget shall be created with the goal of achieving between a 3% and a 4% unassigned fund balance. Fund balance, together with the use of reserves, will be used to offset the tax increase impact of the 22-23 budget. The multi-year budget analysis shall include a multi-year projection for loss and maintenance of such funds in the reserves and fund balance. Management of long-term liabilities. The multi-year budget plan, and specifically the 2022-23 school budget, shall recognize the important role that maintaining and leveraging long-term liabilities play in the district's long-term fiscal stability. For 2022-23, we will match the use of reserves to the extent possible to the allowable budgeted expenditures. Next slide, please. Other considerations. In light of uncertainty with state aid and external funding sources, all considerations may require additional adjustments as information becomes available through the New York State Education Department. The concept of zero-based budgeting will be applied. Zero-based budgeting, for the most part, is just starting off with a budget line item at $0 and building the budget, as opposed to starting off at the prior year and working up or down for that. Line item increases shall be based wherever feasible on past expenditures and or depletion of inventories and on predicted trends. Classroom, office, library, and computer supplies and materials shall be funded at the 2021-22, that's the current school year level, based on projected enrollment as in past years. Baseline adjustments downward to mandatory, non-discretionary expenditures shall be documented and made as permissible. Textbook allocations shall continue to be based on available inventory, and each school's need to ensure textbook alignment with the New York State standards. Instructional staffing, so mainly the teaching staff. Due to social distancing requirements with COVID-19 pandemic, the reopening plan enacted this past August will remain as the instructional staffing guideline unless otherwise changed by an executive order or other mandates. Elementary school staffing shall be based on grade level enrollments and current ratios, kindergarten through second grade, 22 to 25 students, and third grade to fifth grade, 5 to 28 students. Secondary staffing shall be based on the total of enrollments in individual class sections. Regular high school classes with enrollments under 20 may not be conducted except as a 12th grade requirement for graduation. That's an important statement in the guidelines if we adopt it as such. Non-instructional staffing. So this is mainly all of the non-teaching staff. Non-instructional staffing shall be monitored and reviewed consistently within the current school year in order to analyze needs and trends in preparation for the subsequent year, with the following in mind: maintaining staffing as close to current levels as possible, maintain general maintenance repair codes as close to current levels as possible, as full-time positions are vacated to the extent that they will not affect the health and safety, and to the degree possible, positions will not be filled. The public budget review and voting process. So the budget review, the draft budget guidelines, and I did hand out a separate handout attached to your paper-clipped PowerPoint presentation. That's a draft copy of the guidelines. These guidelines were developed after consultation with the Board of Education and a review of last year's community input. The budget guidelines are shared by the board during public session. This provides for an extended opportunity for the members of the community to provide feedback to the board from their respective positions. The projected budget will be developed in strict accordance with these guidelines that permit little flexibility for further reduction, addition, or modification. The review shall consist of consideration of the guidelines and any subsequent changes recommended. Changes to the budget shall result from changes to the guidelines, if any, and will be integrated into the budget by administration and resubmitted to the board. Area or department presentations by the various directors and administrators will not be needed unless questions are raised about the budget guideline revisions to their area. Tax increase. The school district can only assume responsibility for the actual tax increases in the amount equal to the percent expenditure increase of the 2022-23 school year budget. I think that's a clarification that the school district is not responsible for other increases that people may see on their tax bills, such as police or the town. The Board of Education and its administration will respond as appropriate to concerns relative to the increase over which it has authority, but will refer all other tax concerns to the responsible government agency or unit. The district is not responsible for changes in actual taxes due to reductions in state aid, changes in adjusted base proportions, changes in the total assessed valuation of the district, changes in the assessed valuation of individual homes, or the effects of the STAR, which is the school tax relief, and other exemptions, or other implications outside of our jurisdiction. So to wrap up the summary here, the three important dates that will be coming up once the budget is actually reviewed and discussed. On April 12th, the Board of Education at the meeting will adopt the budget. On May 10th, there will be a public hearing after the board adoption of the budget prior to the public vote. And then on May 17th, there will be a budget vote at the district. A few things I just wanted to let you know, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we are dependent on a few government agencies to guide us in the budget process. So one of those is the New York State Office of Real Property Service. They provide us with one of two numbers or two factors in the tax cap. And the number they provide us with is the tax base growth factor. We learned of this number for our district. It's highlighted in yellow back in December. And that number actually means that we are being told we can increase the levy about a little less than 0.5%. So that's about $600,000 based on several factors, but mainly the increased and assessed valuations in our school district. So that's a key component, key number that we have already. Next slide, please. The other number that's very important, and this comes from the New York State Office of the State Comptroller, is the allowable levy growth factor. And that's pegged to the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. And I know lately there's been talk, I'll say at the national level, of the Consumer Price Index exceeding 6%. So the most recent information that we have through November that relates to us in the school district is the New York State Association of School Business Officials advised us that the current CPI was about 4.48. So with only 1 month left in the school year, school districts are being told right now to prepare for no more than 2%. This is the misnomer, I feel, with the New York State tax cap. The previous slide said 0.47. This slide says 2%. So already we are allowed to exceed the cap by a little over 2%. And that's, I think, what causes some confusion when people hear just a 2% tax cap. So this number we should find out shortly, but for the most part, we're capped at 2%. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot from about a year ago. January 19th, the governor last year released his executive budget proposal, and this happens to be called a state aid run. Jackie, I know you had asked Dr. Adams a little earlier today about state aid and if we're receiving our state aid, if we're maximizing our state aid efficiently and effectively. We don't have to get into this right now, but there's a lot of different lines that make up state aid, a lot of different sources where we get the state aid from. So to answer your question, we are receiving our state aid that we were told, and we're using it, I think, as effectively as we can right now in the current budget. The new governor should be releasing her budget shortly. When it comes out, it's just an estimate. The New York State Legislature, which is the Assembly and the Senate, they actually decide on the final state aid run, which typically is a little bit higher than with the governor, but that remains to be seen. Next slide, please. So as I said, once the governor publishes their proposed state aid between January and March, the New York State Legislature, working with the governor, they decide on the final state aid runs for each school district. So this right here is just Connecticut's state aid. The top portion is last year, 2020-21. This is the aid we received. You can see it's about $54 million in the middle of the page. There's a slight adjustment there for the pandemic, which we hopefully won't have to deal with for the following year. And then there's the 2021-22 school year. So you can see our state aid went up from about $54,700,000 to $55,500,000 between 2020-21 and the current school year 21-22. At the very bottom of this report, there's some important information which ties into our almost $8 million in federal funds that we will receive in full shortly. One of those numbers is the CRRSA, and the other one is the American Rescue Plan. What this does not show is, I think, the $250,000 we received for the CARES Act, but at least at the bottom you can see most of the federal aid that we received. Next slide, please. So do we have any questions, any comments, or any suggestions about the budget guidelines that I read? Most important, I think we should focus on the instructional component of class sizes and staffing. And then as we get closer, just take a look at what was mentioned about the reserves and the fund balance.
I want to try to keep the class sizes still down if we can, being reasonable and also, you know, within reason, so that fiscally being responsible, but also, especially in the lower grades and in elementary, I really liked the number this year. If we can even make it a little bit less, I really like that too. But also, I had a couple of questions. You already answered the what drives state aid. Are we getting the most we can? Does the actual spending practices align with our stated goals? Is the district using its resources equitably across the schools to each school? Are there areas where over or underspending can be identified and reallocations made?
So to answer your first question there, the budget guidelines that were adopted last year are really the driving force behind the building of a budget and the establishment and the eventual board adoption, as well as the public vote on the budget. Once those steps are taken in place and the budget is set for the school year, which is July 1, we do our best to monitor the spending in each of those codes. It is a budget. It's a roadmap to how we expect to operate a school district almost a year in advance at some point. When you think that the budget was adopted last April, and here we are in January, some things do happen the way we projected and other things do not. So we were just talking a little earlier today, the current school year budget has funds set aside for virtual teachers, and it also for regular or general education as well as special education. So today we were taking a look at those budgets versus the actual amounts, and that's just one particular category where we have not spent the monies that were budgeted. At the end of January, we will do what's called a fund balance projection. So we'll take a look at every single budget code, revenue as well as expenditures, to determine how much of a surplus we expect to end the school year with. So I think that addressed one of your questions, which is the overall review of the spending.
So might I make a suggestion, Jackie? On page 3 of the budget guidelines, we talk about staffing. And I know last year we had, after the budget was adopted, we actually looked at the staffing and we pushed it lower. So right now, do you have this?
That's a different one, yeah.
Page 3. It says elementary staffing shall be based on grade level enrollments and current ratios. So we had budgeted for ratios between 22 and 25 in K-1-2. And I know the board last year wanted us to look more closely at that 20 to 22 range. So,
Yeah, I'm still.
and that's why I
I'm still
suggest
at
we
that.
look at it right now, because it's here, so.
No, I think 22 is what we used to have.
I really like 20 or
change.
under.
So I don't think we can go 20 or under, because we would be adding a lot of, but I think probably here, we want
And
to
I
say.
definitely, for 3 to 5, I think I had this conversation with you guys. I think going over 25 was way too much,
That's why I wanted to draw your attention to this, so.
because the 25 to the 28 is, I'm totally against that.
Okay, so
I'd rather split.
can we say K to under 22 where possible?
Yeah, I think 22 is a good
I
number.
really would prefer it be under 20 if possible.
Okay, so under 22.
That can't happen. That
20 is under
won't
20,
work.
22. So we'll give you an overall picture.
Okay.
But if we say under 22 where possible, we'll bring you the changes that would be made in.
Right, but I'm just saying, if we have to split it to an 18 and a 15, I'd rather something like that, 18, 18, 15, you know what I'm saying?
I got you.
Rather than a 25 or a 23.
So let's say a K to 2 under 22 and 3 to 5 under 25. And that way we can bring you those numbers and you
Okay.
can see what that looks like.
We can put that on paper, but I'm just saying so that we know, I'm gonna be advocating for under 20 for K to 2 and for 3 to 5 under 22.
Okay.
That's the numbers that I'd love to see. I know I can't always get what I want, but I'm just saying, I would like to advocate for, I think the teachers as is, when you have, especially if we're still dealing with the challenging times of now, with the masks, we've become mask police, we've become everything else going on. I really believe that we need to give them the assistance of less children, so that if there's a child in need, a child that might need services, especially K to 2, and even 3, you're just finding out if these kids need any services. Some of these children that have ADHD, ADD, or anything else, they may be just going for a 504.
Right.
Some up to 5. So the reality is, if you really want to make sure that these kids don't fall through any crack ever, then we need to make sure that the first line of defense, the teachers, have the ability to be able to identify these kids by putting less children in the classroom with them.
I agree, and that's why I wanted to draw your attention to this. So we will bring you the enrollment. I think that's one of the first presentations that we do.
Is this yours?
No, I have extra.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why I wanted to bring your attention to that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I have a question about the high school classes. Do you know if there's a lot that are under 20? Like, would that do away with a lot of electives?
So we will get you those numbers as to how the enrollment shook out this year, so that you can see what that might look like. Because the problem is, when we begin to put the budget together, we do that on classes that kids want to take, not necessarily classes that are on their schedule for next year. So we can give you the actual enrollment in all those classes right now and take a look. We haven't really canceled many classes under 20 ever in the district. That number, I think, is a little high, and I don't think I would cancel a class that had 18 kids enrolled in it. To me, that's still a pretty full class. So but we will give you those numbers in those classes when they start to look like they're getting to like 12, where it's really, if it's a graduation requirement, we would keep it, but if it was something else, we may need to cut that.
All right, great. And for like the elementary school where you need to have higher student ratio, maybe if we can give them more aides in the classroom to help with the children, that would be helpful too, especially like Jackie said, if they're coming into special needs that are being diagnosed early on, if the teacher has the aide in the classroom, that would be helpful to her.
So that's
And
interesting.
That's what we did.
Because I thought that was actually in the budget guidelines, because
did
when
that.
we went above 23 or 24 in kindergarten, well, kindergarten has an aide automatically, but we went to 23 or 24 in first and second grade, the board automatically put that in the budget.
That
So
was last year.
That was a teaching assistant, not an aide.
yeah, teaching assistant.
Okay, I was
So
just,
what I think I actually think we did over 20, over
It was
22.
I thought,
Over 22, we were allowing them, and I actually think 2 years ago, we allowed over 20 because it was when the pandemic hit. We said if you had over 20 and you needed an assistant, not to be shy, to let us know.
yeah, before the pandemic hit, I think it was that we.
It was a
It was
rule of
20
thumb.
over
24. It was 24 in first and second grade. When we went over 24 in first and second grade, we put a teaching assistant in there. We can put that in the budget that, you know, classes will be looked at over 24, but most of your classes will be under 22. So
I
we may
most
not
definitely
put-
don't want to see 28s.
Oh,
Because the
we've
truth of
never
the
done a
matter is,
28.
you'll see a 28 at one of the larger elementary schools, and then you'll see a 12 at one of the smaller ones.
Right.
And that is not true equity across the district.
No, it is. The breakage is bad. So you know what? Bob, let's put in the guidelines that the board will consider adding a teaching assistant to grades first and second if the enrollment goes over 24.
I thought we had an assistant in kindergarten to begin with.
We do have teaching assistants in kindergarten
Automatically?
automatically.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to go on to board discussions, but I'm going to start with Marisol because she's only bringing up one item.
Yes, I am bringing up the screenagers. So the Mental Health Committee is hosting a virtual screening of teenagers growing up in the digital age. So screenagers is going to explore how learning, playing, and socializing online will affect the teens' development and their attention span, their self-esteem, their moral instinct. The film will explore solutions to handle screen time, provide parents with tools to help young people develop self-control and find balance. So it's scheduled to be Tuesday, January 18th at 7 p.m. It is a virtual class, and the district is going to be giving out an online registration form in the next few days. And even if you can't see it on the 18th, register, so this way you'll get the link and you'll be able to watch it.
Parents as well as students can watch this also, right?
This is actually for parents,
Right.
and it's for students, I believe, in grade 5 to 12. It's for parents from K to 12, but it's for students 5 to 12.
Correct.
So it really is important because parents are the one that has control, and if parents should behave so the children learn from the parents. So it's important for the parents to watch this as well.
Where is it going to be accessed? How do you get?
You're right, the district's going to send out a link to the parents where you can register for it, and then you'll be sent a link for it.
Okay, now we're going to move on to, we're moving on to you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, now, first one is going to be about the snow day versus the virtual day. Children should be able to enjoy being kids and having a traditional old-school snow day like most other districts had. Is there a reason why we chose, not we as in the board, but in administration, the superintendent and cabinet, that chose to stay virtual when all the districts that we normally mirror went to a snow day? Now, I understand if we had already exhausted our snow days, it would make perfect sense to go to a virtual day before we started chipping away at an actual week vacation. I would absolutely understand that, and I would be for it. But I am totally, personally, and I heard from many parents how they were against children having to be on a virtual day while their friends are outside playing in the snow and having a snow day. A traditional old school snow day, which is just as important in a lot of ways, just being a kid, especially during such a challenging year with so many things going wrong this year, with the last 2 years with this pandemic. I really don't understand why. When was the last time we had a snow day? 2 years ago? A snow day. Or we used the day. Okay. So my question is, when was the last time we exhausted all of our snow days?
It was a few years ago. Actually, my first year here, we exhausted all of our snow days before the February break, and the calendar that was scheduled before I arrived at the district actually had us opening in the middle of February, in the middle of the February break. We actually only brought teachers back in for that one. I can remember 2 or 3 years in my 8-year tenure here where we exhausted all of our snow days. So the question is why we chose to remain virtual when the majority of the island, which is an absolute true statement, went to a snow day. And there were really two reasons. The first was we had reached a critical staffing juncture, which we recognized in the middle of the day on Thursday. And at that point, we knew that we would not be able to be open on Friday, snow or no snow. We let our teachers know and the community know about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which was very late for our high school teachers, and I apologize for that delay. And then we asked our teachers to prepare to be virtual the next day. As Long Islanders, which is something that I wrote in my email, know, sometimes we get a ton of snow when it's predicted, and sometimes we get no snow when it's predicted. So if we had received no flakes at all, we would not have been open on Friday. So after we made that call, I know that the vast majority of our teachers went home and prepared for that. Whether you're a kindergarten teacher who made a cozy corner in your house so that you could make the kids feel comfortable in their very first virtual environment, or an AP teacher who translated their work to be something that could be delivered virtually, when we decided that the roads were not safe enough for the majority of our non-instructional folks to come to school, at that point, could we have said snow day? Yes. But I think I wanted to treat our professionals as the professionals that they are, and I know many people went home and prepared lessons for kids, and to say that the time that they spent making those lessons on Thursday night after we sent them the information that we were going virtual the next day, I did not want to have them waste their time, and that's the reason that we stayed virtual. I did let the community know that if there's any more snow emergencies, we will be closed for snow emergencies. If we have staffing issues moving forward in the COVID days that we have, then we will go virtual. We will also only go virtual on a snow day if we've used the 2 days that are already built into the calendar.
Yes, I would like to make sure that we don't pivot to another virtual day as opposed to a snow day. If it's a snow day, it should be a snow day, and until they're exhausted, that's what they're there for. The other thing that I wanted to say is, I'm glad you brought that up. While we're speaking about professionals, I'm glad that you did that for the professionals, the teachers, but what about the other professionals? The bus drivers who didn't know until the next day? What about the non-instructional staff? I know I got a phone call at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. I don't understand why other districts, such as Sachem and Smithtown, called theirs the night before. Actually many, but those two I'm actually on the calling list, so I actually got the messages myself. I don't understand. They called it. Why would we want to put people on the road if they're calling for bad weather? It's just a bad practice, especially when it's bad for first responders, for fire department, for EMTs, people. We don't want people on the road. We don't want people on the road having car accidents, putting their lives at risk, and having accidents to get to school to do what if there's no students there? Once we pivoted to virtual, what were all of these non-instructional people going to do? Why didn't we just give them the virtual day as well, in a lot of ways?
So again, predicted snow doesn't always yield snow. And we really thought that a lot of the non-instructional folks who maybe are our clericals, our food service folks could come in and do things in the kitchen that they don't get to do normally when they have students there. They can inventory. Our clericals, we were hoping would be able to get in. And again, we made sure that when we checked the roads, we gave a 2-hour delay to our non-instructional folks so that we could check the roads the next morning, which is really what the majority of the islip cluster did. Because there are some times when there's very little snow down here and there's a lot of snow other places. So we made the decision on Thursday evening to let all our non-instructional folks have a 2-hour delay. That way we could figure out whether the roads were good enough for them to be on, and obviously that did not happen. We called 502 people on Thursday afternoon to let them know that we were going to be watching the roads in the morning. And on Friday morning, I called 360 people. So I'm going to actually ask the public who are watching this tonight, if you got a phone call on Friday morning at about 7 a.m. and you're not an employee in any way, shape, or form, because I pulled employee lists from our school messenger website, and if you are erroneously on an employee list and you're a parent and not an employee and have never been a sub and don't do any kind of subbing, please email me so that I can make sure that your group is checked appropriately. I did not want parents to get a phone call in the morning. I wanted the non-instructional staff to say, look, we don't want you to take the risks on the road. But I really did want to have our clericals in the building if it was possible and it wasn't going to put them in danger in case parents needed to call for some assistance.
I just would hate to see somebody get hurt trying to get to work in that kind of weather. That's my concern. And the other problem is, do we now have non-instructional staff had a snow day? Is that what that was called? Is it considered a snow day? And then we have teachers that had to work. So I just don't see how that's fair. I don't see how we just didn't call a snow day for everybody, fair across the board, for the children, for the staff, for everybody. Just a blanket effect. That's it. That's what I'm advocating for in the future. I just don't think it was fair across the board. That's one. Two, I have an issue with some of these bus stops. I've been going over this with you guys for really the last year. I do know that I've been told by many people that some of the bus stops were determined by the state. I was told that in the past that they have to be in a certain spot. Once I was told it was a 1/4 mile home, there was logistics. I was told so many different things, and really what I need to know is, what are we doing with the bus stops, especially the ones that are on Ocean Avenue in Lakeland that are very dangerous? What are we doing with the ones by RMS that are dangerous? And what are we doing with the ones that all these people have called in and said, we have issues with some of these bus stops? Why can't they be moved off the main roads? And also, why can't we ask the bus drivers for their input? These people drive the buses. I would like to hear what they have to say. I also would like to know why we're still using that routing service and a mentor, as opposed to using tax dollars inappropriately. There's no reason to have that in place. I mean, there's no reason why, like other districts, we can't just have bus drivers who make lefts and rights and do their job. Give them the ability to do their job the effective way that they know how to do it.
I also had a couple of questions, which I had forwarded to Mr. Hauser regarding busing issue. And I believe that Mylan had also sent an email or a text. Someone had been concerned about their issue with the busing, and we should be getting an answer at the next board meeting. So let's just sit tight, and hopefully there'll be some changes
Well,
where
maybe
necessary.
Maybe we could also find out for next meeting, this would be very important actually. The schedule is way too tight for the buses to be effective. I finally figured this out here. You got the high school, and then you have the middle schools release, and then you have the tier 1, which is Cherokee, and then you have tier 2, which is the rest of the elementary schools. Okay, if you change the dismissal time by a few minutes, it would make all the difference to these bus drivers. We are putting people at risk in making people rush. And I just don't think it's the way to do things. I really don't. I think it's something that needs to seriously be looked into, if not for this year, definitely for September. I think that the schedule is way too tight. You look at the minutes. I was looking at the minutes of how long a bus driver is supposed to get from from the high school, deliver their children, and then get to the next place. It's insane. On a good day, it's difficult. How do we expect these people to do this on a day when there's ice on the roads or anything else? It's extremely difficult, and we are actually setting them up to fail. I just don't think it's fair. We need to give them the tools to be successful, and we need to help them be successful by looking into ways that help them. And I just don't think we're doing that. We need to adapt and overcome the issues. We already have the issues with we need more drivers, but we also need to figure out what ways creatively to make this work. We need to change things. We really do in a lot of ways. The other thing I wanted to know was why not create some jobs from DAs? Are we doing anything with DAs where we can give a DA the ability to maybe learn how to drive a bus over the summer so that it's not considered a job where they're not going to be able to advance anywhere? Maybe give them a position where they can advance to, since we need drivers so much. Because I'll tell you, we get so much money for special needs children, and we really need DAs. They're very important. People don't realize how important they are with our special needs community. If a kid gets on a school bus and has a bad day on a bus and doesn't have a DA there to help them, or has a DA and it just doesn't work for them on the bus, that could really wreck their whole day. So we need to really, really give that job the respect it deserves, and also look into what advancements we can do with that position.
Yeah, Jackie, thank you for bringing this up. And I know you brought up a number of issues here, and maybe if I work backwards, it would help. Typically, if someone comes to the district and they do not have a commercial driver's license with the Class B endorsement, by contract, we actually hire them as a driver assistant. And then we use our 19A staff to actually train those people as DAs in-house to become drivers. We have 2 people right now who are being trained to be drivers. In prior years, many of these people would be trained over the summer, but due to the situation we have right now, we're training them during the school year. I also believe, and Christina might be able to verify this as well, that many of the driver assistants who are assigned to a particular bus route are assigned because of a special needs student's individual education, their IEP program. So I believe, there are many students who actually have that on their IEP, that we're required to put a driver assistant on the bus. Yeah, but that's typically why we might have an assistant on the bus, but we do train them in-house. I did hand out to all the board members this New York State Education Department pupil transportation guidelines, okay? And it mentions everything from school bus stops, how students are supposed to get to the stop and how we're supposed to design the stops, the number of students at a stop, the visibility, the signage that could be placed near or on a bus route. So there's many different factors that go into it. Jackie, you mentioned something about the software. We use the TransFinder software to help us actually plan the route. That
Yes, but some of
software's-
these routes, I've done some research. Some of these routes, it's just kind of like GPS. Some of these routes, if you use GPS sometimes, and I've done it, you put GPS, you put an address in, and it tells you it's going to take you the fastest route, but it really doesn't. It takes you all over the place.
I agree.
So all I'm saying is, while computers are wonderful, they are a spectacular tool, and I'm grateful for them, we also need to give, respect to where we have these people who are been in the district. We have bus drivers, I'm sure, that have been here, or people in transportation that have been here for many, many years. We should be using them as a wealth of information and say to them, hey, what do you think? Is there a different route? Maybe they know that going up this road is dangerous. Maybe they know going around the curve of Ocean Avenue is dangerous to stop. It's not a good stop. Maybe we should turn and make the stop on a side road. My point is, I feel like that should have been done last year when we had brought it up. We should have been looking into making a committee. I was told we were going to do all that stuff and nothing ever happened. I feel like that's kind of thing needs to be done, where there's some sort of committee where we can get these people who have the knowledge, more so than just the computers. I think that that like GPS, they're not obviously doing their job. And also, I really want to know what we are wasting in taxpayer dollars to a mentor that I do not, mentor position, that I do not believe is something that is actually necessary at this point.
To address your comments about the TransFinder database, and I'm just going to give one example here of how the software itself is only as smart as the information that we put in it. So if we have a particular bus route that we've set up and it has possibly one or two maybe railroad crossings, the software is looking for speed. So for us to input the speed of that bus or the average speed. Obviously, if that bus gets held up at a bus stop, at a railroad crossing, and even it could get held up at 2, the speed means nothing versus the actual time that the bus is held up. So we have to be aware of those factors. In regards to the transportation consultant contract, I'm not so sure I would use the word waste of taxpayer money. We do use Mr. Robertson on a fairly regular basis, both myself as well as the Director of Transportation. I'm sure you're aware, and obviously you are because you mentioned it as you were speaking, the staffing situation that's going on right now, which is not just unique to Connecticut. It's unique to our private contractor. It's unique to other public schools, some worse than others. We've had to consult with Mr. Robertson as to what he feels is the best way for us to attract bus drivers. You know, we went out, we put signage up on every one of the elementary schools.
Excellent.
It seemed to do a good job in the beginning. It really brought awareness to the community that we were in need of drivers, but that has tapered off. And we're running into a situation, as Dr. Adams mentioned, we get to these thresholds where we're really at a point where we might not be able to provide transportation to many of the students. So Mr. Robertson tends to be helpful to us because of the other districts he works for, trying to help us with ways that we can attract and ways that we can retain drivers. I mean, just in the month of February that's coming up in 30 days, we're going to lose 3 drivers. I told you a few minutes ago, we only have 2 who are being trained right now. So just that 1 month period, we have a deficit, and we were already short drivers. So we are trying to work together to try to come up with new and innovative ideas to attract people. I mean, we need drivers here. And I've let you know in the past how short we are. The other thing, too, is, and you mentioned this with lateness, and you mentioned this with safety, is Joanne Froberg and I consulted with John Robertson Friday morning for about an hour and a half about the items you brought up with the various roads, streets, avenues, and all, and how we can try to make those stops safer. John obviously has a history here with the district that Joanne, only coming here in May, she does not. He tends to be very familiar with the whole geographical area of the school district and a lot of the routes. So we have found his advice and his, I'll say, expertise to benefit us. We just did a whole analysis up at the high school. The buses are leaving several minutes earlier now. We found there was too much time by the time the high school dismissed to the time the students got on the bus to the time the first bus pulled out. And that was causing latenesses at the middle schools that was trickling down into the elementary schools. So January 3rd, we made an official time of 2:16 in the afternoon that the first school bus and all the others will pull out of that lot. They're not waiting because that's causing the delay. And John was very helpful in guiding us as to where some of these, I'll say, tweaks can be made in our routes and just in our practice to help us. So his overall fee of $40,000, I don't want to use the word waste of taxpayer money. I think it's a very wise use of money when it comes time to safety, when it comes time to our staffing here. Certainly if people have other ideas, you do. You brought
Well,
them.
I feel like it's not working. Obviously, this isn't working because, like I said, we still have dangerous bus stops. We haven't changed them. It's been over a year now that some of us have been complaining about it. We've had community members who've complained about it. My whole thing is, and I know Lee said this many times, Jackie, it's an educational institution. Yes, and I've used that now. I've said this is in the email to you guys this week. It is an educational institution, but if you cannot get children here safely, okay, then it doesn't matter that we're bringing them to an educational institution because they're not going to make it here in one piece. Yeah. So I am all about transporting children safely, okay? I'm all about making sure our children are safe and healthy because you cannot get an education without that first. So that's paramount. So like I said, it's great, and we really are an educational institution, and we need to value the education that they get in Connect What. It's a wonderful education. But we also need to be aware that we really need to look into what we can do to fix some of these problems that are they're still there. Yeah. So regardless, my thing is this, where we have a mentor position, okay? I really feel once we bring in a director position, we should not need to have all these mentors too, okay? I'm just saying, we have to start to look at, like I just said on this, very simple. You know, are there reallocations of funds we can use this money? Because later on, I'm going to be asking you a question about the $33,000 from one of the budget transfers. I need to understand, when it comes to money, why we are paying this money out and we're not really getting the services for this position that I'm seeing. I'm not seeing it, okay? That's what I'm saying. We're still seeing the complaints. We're still seeing the shortages. We're still seeing the dangerous bus stops. What can we do to fix that? I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm not like saying it at you, I'm saying just in general. I know these are things that need to be worked on, but maybe, that's why I said, can you maybe think about having a committee? I'd like to advocate for a committee. And in that committee, I'd like to see you have people from transportation that are actually the drivers. I'd like to see the drivers. I'd like to see the people who are there. I don't want to see just somebody who we're bringing in from the outside that works in other districts that's a mentor. I want to see the drivers who do the routes every day, who might have something, I believe they have something valuable to say, hey, you know, look, maybe taking a right here is not the best thing to do. Maybe taking a left. It's just like us. When I drive the roads, I know what's the best route, the safest route. So I'm just saying, maybe we need to explore that idea of maybe having a committee, having parents involved, having administration, having maybe a board member. Like, I think it would be a great opportunity to really fix these errors.
And so for the January 25th, and I'm not trying to postpone or prolong this, but for the January 25th board meeting, I've invited the Director of Transportation and Mr. Robertson as well to come to the board meeting to really open up this discussion, because if it is a true district-wide study, I'm going to use the word study, that involves a lot of different stakeholders, I just want to make it clear what we need to do and what the goal is. I think you have made it very clear from your perspective what you would like to see in the goals. I just want to make sure that the journey we set out on, we accomplish the goal as best we can. So if you don't mind, at the January 25th meeting, we can have at least a discussion with those two individuals and the board and the public.
Wonderful, thank you. The other thing I had asked Linda was, I've been asking for a while now, what are the core values of the district? We keep saying we're going to look into these things, and then we don't. When was the last time we looked at our district's core values, which lead to the vision of our district, which leads to our mission statement? I've been asking this for at least a year now, here and there, and I just want to know what we're going to do. We were told that we were going to have a committee form. We were going to look into these things. We were going to look into board goals, and so far, we haven't done that.
So we did put together a committee charge. The board approved that in the end of October. And then unfortunately, I got ill. Generally, I wanted to do a first meeting of that committee in November because you generally don't want to do a first committee meeting right before the holidays. So I'm looking to put that in. I don't really feel like that should be a Zoom meeting. I'd rather have people in the room to have that discussion. The district mission statement was actually formulated my first year here by bringing people around the table who were really interested in taking a look at that. So since you asked, a couple boards ago, I think it was 2 years or 3 years ago, they came up with the core values of responsible budget, increasing rigor, student achievement and accountability, implementing district-wide mental health and character education programs, engaging teachers, students, and community members in exemplary technology utilization, increasing community engagement and involvement in collaboration, education, and advocacy, continually enhancing the professional practice and expertise of our faculty and staff, and reviewing a programmatic and fiscal impact for possible expansion of services. Those were the core values that we actually worked on as a board. A few years ago, we had a workshop where we came together and we took what had been brainstormed out of the steering committee that was happening at the time, and the board solidified those as the core values that we then created goals. The board created goals, overarching large goals underneath those. So you do have that in front of you. I actually sent it to you also in the FYI, but I will be putting together a call for help out to the community to come together and take a look at the mission statement as it currently stands and see if that makes sense. I would like to invite the board to do some kind of a workshop because I was actually unaware that there was a Board of Education mission statement, which I'm not sure when the last time that was looked at, to be honest with you, Jackie. It's actually on the website, and it says the Board of Education mission statement is to prepare all children for life by providing them the best education, regardless of their abilities, at the most reasonable cost. To help members of our school community respect one another, to promote the mental, physical, and social well-being of the children of the community. All lofty goals, and I think probably the board should do a workshop and kind of workshop that and talk that and the core values that had been adopted a while back and see if that still is something that you guys are interested in. But as I said, I apologize, but I did get, unfortunately, the Delta variant of COVID in November, and it did take me off my game for a bit. And I certainly am very excited, actually, about pulling the steering committee back together. And as soon as we can get together in person, because I don't really, Zoom meetings to me don't give everybody the voice that you need in the room. So I'm hoping sometime in February that when this goes down, to have our first meeting in person of that steering committee.
Wonderful, that's what I was looking forward to. I have some ideas, and I love the idea of being involved in that. I think that's it. I think I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Bob, I appreciate it, and we can all discuss more further at the next meeting.
We're going to then move on to public comment. Does anyone have any questions for the public on the consent agenda? No, okay, then I'm not going to have to read this whole thing if no one's coming up. Okay, now we're going to move on to personnel matters. Need a motion and a second to approve the instructional and non-instructional personnel items as presented. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Financial matters, need a motion and a second to approve items 2 through 7. Motion?
Second.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I actually have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
It would be for Bob. Bob, can I have, or can we have, a 3-year analysis of the overtime, please?
Yes, 3 years going back for the 3 entities that we provide the reports for?
Yes, correct, 3 years of, the overtime.
For whom? For what groups? All groups?
All of them.
Yes, I can do that for you. So you're looking for, looks like plant facilities, security,
Technology?
buildings and grounds here, and transportation. I have 3 reports that I'm looking at that make up all those different groups of employees. So yes, I will do that for you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion so carried. Brian?
Aye.
Okay. Call for a motion and a second to approve items 2 through 20 on the consent agenda, with the addition of 21 as discussed in executive session, consultant services. On what? I need the motion in a second first. I'll make a motion. Okay, second. Who wants a second?
Second.
Okay,
And I have a
Jackie?
question on 9.
okay. Let Marisol go first, please.
No, I'm gonna go first because number 2's first.
Okay.
Lee, like really tonight,
Well, I just figured that you didn't have.
mine's gonna be
to
super
look at
fast.
it. I was trying to be fair.
It's about, Bob, it's coming at you, it's about the 33,000. I actually made a note on it. 33,000 was moved from the budget transfers from, it looks like medical employee fund. Does that money get reimbursed? Is this money being put back in for these employees? And why is this being moved like this? To a summer enrichment program.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the transfer right now. The funds came out of the New York State Employee Health Insurance, so that's a medical insurance account for employees, and it was transferred to our summer enrichment program at BOCES, which may be, I'll have to verify it with it's the special education department, but I believe it was probably an enrichment program with BOCES. We'll have to verify that. So those funds are not reimbursed back to the medical. Once they come out of that medical to pay for that BOCES program.
Do we typically take money out of an employee health insurance and put it into a summer enrichment program?
We look at various codes that we feel we're not going to use the budgeted funds. The New York State Employee Health Insurance account right now happens to have a surplus in it, so it's one of the codes that we could use. There are others, but that just so happens to be the code we use.
I just wanted to make sure that it didn't affect any of the employees' health insurance, by no means.
It, by no means, retiree or active. It doesn't
All right,
affect.
thank you.
Marisol?
My question is, I guess for legal, on the armed guards, if the extension is approved, is there a way to have community input to see if they actually want it added to the budget?
Yes, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by community input.
No, what she's asking is could it go on the referendum and let the community decide if they want armed guards or not? If they decide no, there shouldn't be a problem with their contract. If they decide yes, there shouldn't be a problem with their contract. We don't have to put anything in their contract, as far as I know, to have a line item for community to vote.
So there are 2 types of referendum. There's binding referendum and advisory referendum. So it sounds like what you're asking for is a binding referendum where the board would not be guided, but mandated to not determine whether to hire armed guards. That is a responsibility or a duty of the Board of Education to make that decision. And the Commissioner of Education has said that the Board of Education can't delegate that to the voters. Delegate hiring, delegate whether guns should be on school ground is a determination that must be made by the Board of Education.
Okay, I'm going to have to disagree with you, and I know Mr. Gercio is going to call me up on this, but he told me what districts did do it, so.
So that's why I said there's two different kind of referendum. There's a binding referendum, which it sounds like what you're talking about, and then there's advisory referendum, which while are not illegal, are not recommended, right? So an advisory referendum is where, you get a sense from the voters as to what they're looking for, but you're not binded or bound by what they say, because the ultimate decision would have to be made by the Board of Education. Other ways to get that kind of feedback, according to the commissioner, would be to have public hearings, committees may be formed in order to get feedback from the community and things of that nature. So maybe some other districts have done advisory referendum, which are not illegal, but the ultimate determination with regard to hiring and whether to allow weapons on school grounds is that of the Board of Education.
Can I just ask you something, Lisa? And I'm going to ask you because I've asked you now at several meetings, because we already had committees. We already did the committee. We did all this. We're just going to keep on pounding this. I'm going to ask you, can you explain what is permissible or advisable regarding referendums for armed guards? You guys already advised us several times. I know you just did it again, but what is advisable from legal?
Well, what we can tell you is
And
what
permissible.
So the Commissioner of Education, and we're just giving legal advice. It's not a personal opinion or anything, please.
They have an agenda. It's an agenda tonight.
I'm just telling you what the law
It's not yours,
says.
so it's not yours.
There's no agenda,
No, it's your
Jackie.
agenda. It's your agenda, Lee. It's your agenda.
So what the Commissioner of Education, who the Board of Education is guided by, has said is that the authority of the board comes under Education Law 1709. And any of those responsibilities that you obtain under 1709, you must make those decisions. Anything that flows from there, you must make those decisions as well. That would include hiring. There's specific language in the law about whether guns are permitted on school ground. That's a determination by the Board of Education as to whether that is something that can happen. So to not take that authority and not to follow that authority and to delegate that to the voters is something the commissioner says the board is not permitted to do. What it also sounds like you're asking is whether you can obtain an advisory referendum from the community, and you can because it's not illegal. But the commissioner has discouraged that because ultimately the decision is that of the Board of Education with regard to things like hiring and whether guns are permitted on school ground. There are some referendum that are required under the law, and you're familiar with some of them. How many board seats there can be. 7, 5, that's a decision of the community that the board has to follow. Capital projects, that's a decision of the community that the board has to follow because the law says you give that to the voters to decide. So there, transportation distance, right? The voters get to decide what the transportation distances are going to be, and that's outlined in the law. So it's very specific, the type of referendum that the voters get to decide. So the commissioner has determined decisions that the board has the authority to make, the board should make. You can get an advisory referendum from the community, but ultimately you make the decision as the Board of Education. So I hope that's helpful.
Helpful, I mean,
So if I can make a comment or statement, so now would be the time for the board members who were not in favor of having the armed guards they could actually vote no to this, and that would stop us from having armed guards. So for those that are in favor of this, you can stop it now. Is that correct, Lisa?
Essentially, yes. So if you don't want to have armed guards as part of your budget, you don't put it in your budget. You say, we as a Board of Education have determined this is what the budget's going to look like, and it's not going to include armed guards.
I have a sense that this board majority wants to hear from the public. And then if a decision has to be made after that, then the board will make this decision based on what they hear from the public. That's what I'm hearing. Am I hearing that correctly, Marisol?
I just wanted to be clear that it is not advisable to be put in a referendum, that we've been told multiple times. The community is under the impression that they could just put this in a referendum. It's been voted on already. It's already part of our budget. But I just wanted clarity on the referendum.
Oh, I thought you wanted to put it on the referendum to hear the voice of the people. That's what you told.
Well, I had
earlier.
questions. I had questions about how we can go about it, because to me, it wasn't clear. I didn't know how to go about it. So I wanted clarity, and I wanted legal to clarify it for me, basically.
Armed guards are a decision of the Board of Education, so you make the final decision. Referendum are not legally allowed with regard to decisions that the Board of Education have to make. That's a binding referendum. With regard to advisory referendum, the Commissioner of Education has discouraged that because these decisions are ultimately that of the Board of Education. So what the Commissioner has recommended is public hearings on the issue, committees be created, to get feedback from the community to guide you in your determination as to how you want to make a decision on these very heavy issues that you have to decide as a Board of Education.
There's just a group out there that's really upset
Lee,
that
what group, Lee?
I'm
Lee, what
speaking.
group?
I'm speaking.
What group, Lee?
I'm speaking.
What group? I want to know what group.
I'm speaking.
I would like to, I would like to know what
In
group.
my conversation, I will
Do
tell you
you
what
see a
group.
group of people here?
Yeah?
Do we get a group, do we get emails? We get emails for other stuff.
I'm only making this, listen, I didn't bring this up for tonight.
This is a dangerous precedent you're setting in saying we have something in the budget, but because a few, and a very few people are complaining to one or two board members, we're going to just do whatever. We can't do that for anything.
Jackie, that's not at all what was happening. I've always said I'm for armed guards. I still stand by the fact that I am for armed guards.
Okay, but then do you
I just had a question
understand
for legal
you
about
got-
hold on.
But you never let but Marisol, you never let legal explain an executive. You never let legal explain an executive.
We didn't have
You've
time
gotten
executive.
emails. You and Brian got the same email as me. You got the same email as me. Everybody got the same email. How many times does Lisa have to send the same email to this Board of Ed? If you want to vote it out, vote it out. I'm not telling you not to vote it out. Do what you feel. You have your one vote, one voice.
Jackie, can we speak?
But how many
Jackie,
times are
Jackie.
you guys going to go round and round?
Jackie,
And again, this was a conversation for public, not executive, just to be very clear.
Jackie, I'm trying to have the conversation in public.
It was being done in executive, which was wrong. And thank you, Mylin, for reminding me that this was a public conversation.
Jackie,
So
would you like to hear-
I wasn't on the board when this was discussed to be put as a referendum, because when I got on the board, armed guards were already a thing. So I wanted clarity for myself.
Okay, but did you get the email from Lisa months ago? You were on the board when the email came through.
No, I didn't get that email.
The email came through over the summer. Again, this went over. That email has come to us several times. You guys were definitely on the board. We went over that email.
Jackie, that's not a public forum, that email. We just got a public explanation from our attorney as to what can and cannot be done with a referendum. Now it's in public, now people know it. Now we can talk about number 9 on here and where I stand and where you think I'm being bullied. No one's bullying me. I haven't had one conversation about armed guards with anybody. I've talked about it when I was running for the board and I was asked what I would do, and I said I would look into what a referendum does. And I was not on the board. I have no idea what it's like to be on the board. Anyone that's not on a board has no idea. There's a lot that goes into it. And now that I just got an explanation, now I understand. And now we can talk about number 9, and if we want to extend that contract for another year, yes or no. I'm for armed guards.
Okay, what I'm saying to you is, and what I was trying to say, and you guys obviously weren't understanding was, and I'll say it again, if you understand security and you understand what it entails, then you understand that it is a dangerous precedent to say, and like I said, it was never for me about not giving the community an input. That is why I 100% supported Linda when she did the committees. I came to all the committee meetings. Went to all the hearings with her. Lee came. We were at all those meetings. Whoever wanted to be here, we came to all the extra meetings. My point is, we did it the right way, regardless if some don't see it that way. We followed the legal guidance. We followed it.
Jackie, our point was just to have a conversation and get answers, questions from legal.
But that's not what was
Jackie,
said in
can I
executive,
finish,
Brian.
Jackie?
That's not what was said to me in executive. So let's be very clear here right now.
Go ahead.
That's
speak,
not what was
Jackie.
said.
No one else is allowed to speak but you, so go on.
No, you know what, Brian? Go be condescending some more, okay?
Well,
It always comes out. It always comes out
Jackie,
eventually.
I'm trying to talk and you're not allowing me.
Because you're saying, I'm in the middle of telling you guys that it's a dangerous precedent,
I was in the middle of
and that
speaking and you're
you
interrupting.
guys don't understand, I don't think. That's what I'm telling you. That it's very simple. It's a dangerous precedent to say to people, you know what, you should vote on security. Hey, you know what, we'll have you vote on, next week we'll have you vote on if we're gonna add, a special tool to security guards. Let's have them vote on every line we have for security.
But the
The truth of the matter is, you are on the board now for months. You know firsthand, you've seen it. You've seen on social media all the things that get spun. You've seen firsthand what really goes on and the dangers that go on. And the truth that can't go to the public, that because we can't be transparent sometimes, as much as I want to be, it's against the law. Because because of FERPA. But what I'm explaining to you is, that's why, if you ask Lisa, that's why, because a lot of things with security can't be spoken about in public.
But Jackie, all I was trying to figure out here, or Marisol was asking, and what we learned is what can and cannot be done with a referendum. Take armed guards out of it. A referendum for whatever. Now we understand what can and cannot be done, like she said, with the law and bus stops and certain things that we have to follow here. Okay. This had nothing to do really with armed guards, but it came up because it was on here, and the question had to be asked. Now that it's answered, I understand.
That's actually not why it came up. We know why it came up, but that's okay.
You're right, I'm wrong, always.
Okay. All in favor of the consent agenda numbers 1 through 21?
Actually, I want to pull number 9 for a separate vote.
Does that need a board agenda, or a board vote consensus to pull it?
No, each individual board member has the right to, when there is a consent agenda, to pull an item for a separate vote.
Thank you.
It would have been a yes for me.
Okay, so it's 1 through, without minus 9.
It's 2 through 8 and then 10 through 21.
Right, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, number 9.
So we're voting on all items excluding 9 right now.
Correct. Armed guards, we're going to vote on separate, so everybody can give their vote.
Nine. Okay.
We need a motion and a second.
Motion second for number 9.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Lisa, can I have you poll the board on this, number 9? An individual, I want to hear not just I want each individual board member.
It was a unanimous vote. We're going to move on now.
Can't she ask the poll to vote? Can't one board member ask the poll?
I just flat out said I'm for armed guards.
I want Lisa to ask each board member the question and how they're gonna vote on number 9. Because I've been on the board 8 years, this has been going on for 3, 4 years now with the armed guards. I just want it on record, how individually, everyone,
We all said yes. We all said yes. We don't need.
Lee, but you didn't
There's
say
five-
yes in executive.
5 yeses,
So just put it on the record here. This is not what went on in executive. So put it, and it was supposed to be for public, so technically it's not illegal for me to say this.
That is not true, Jackie. What
Yeah,
you're
it's not,
saying is false.
what you guys were talking about is not legal. It is not illegal for me to talk about something like that because it's not technically supposed to be talked about in executive. Correct, Lisa?
But because you're
I mean,
saying,
it depends on, I don't recall the discussion in executive in order to answer the question
About the
fully.
referendum.
I'm having a hard time to be able to answer the question because it really depends on the context of the conversation. However, there was a question that was asked about whether there should be a roll call vote. That's typically done only for certain items, but it's certainly up to the board as to whether they want to do a roll call vote on that particular item. So I would throw it back to the board president in order to make that determination as to whether this is going to be something put on the table as a roll call vote, because it's not required.
It's not required. There are 5 people. 5 people said yes. Let's just move on to public comment. Thank you. Now,
I was a yes, I was
I
a
will
yes,
now
Mylan.
open the floor for the public
Mylan, I was a yes
comment
for doing
portion
a
of
roll
the
call.
agenda. I will call individuals forward one at a
Mylan, I've
time.
said yes 3 times, 4 times.
I was
Yes.
also a yes, Mylan, for the
And I
record.
was a yes, Mylan. I will call individuals forward one at a time. Please wait for my acknowledgement before stepping up to the podium. You should have received a numbered card from security on your way in. If you have not, please see a security guard in the back of the room. Any person wishing to address the board shall address the board president only. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and relate to school matters only. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for one or more topics. If members of the audience speak out of turn, the board will take an immediate recess until order is restored. Any specific questions asked will be answered by the appropriate party and posted to our district board docs page, which can be accessed through the district's website. If you have a specific question and would like an email follow-up, please complete the card on the podium with your name and contact information. Once complete, please provide to the district clerk. So let's start. Number 1.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for allowing me to speak again today. I am going to speak at every board meeting, and I'll say the same thing over and over again. This time I'll tell you I moved to Bohemia 10.5 years ago for this school district, despite discussions to leave the state, which I plan on doing by the end of this year, because my daughter's going to start kindergarten, and I refuse to have her sitting in a mask all day long. And I'm certainly going to refuse a forced vaccination. But I moved to Bohemia 10.5 years ago for this school district, and I got to tell you, over the years, and especially these last few years during this pandemic, because it is a pandemic, I'm really disappointed at what I'm seeing that's going on and what I'm hearing. By no means am I a medical expert, but time and time again, masks have been proven to be harmful to a child's health and well-being. And in fact, it is 100% child abuse. The average child's IQ has dropped by 20 points during this pandemic with the virtual learning and the masks and all this other nonsense that's happening. There are countless studies and thousands of doctors that are against masks and vaccine mandates, and yet they're being silenced. Why are adverse reactions to these vaccines being taken down by big tech? Yes, there are risks and benefits to all drugs and vaccines, but the risks to the COVID vaccines are being kept from all of us, No one's concerned about that. Yet these vaccines are still being pushed on children. My daughter is 5 years old. She is no way getting this vaccine. I'm not anti-vax. I am anti-COVID vax because there's not enough data to support this non-vaccine that they're calling a vaccine. If you're not asking yourself why this is happening and why doctors are being silenced, and you're just going with the flow, then you're part of the problem. Every single person should be asking themselves why this is happening. Why are doctors and studies being silenced? They can't all be crazy conspiracy theorists, which, by the way, we're finding a year plus later, the conspiracies are actually true, and they're not conspiracy theories at all. I was one of those skeptics until I started digging. How foolish was I? There is a very clear agenda here, and once you dig for answers and learn the truth, you just can't unsee it. Continual mask wearing has been proven to increase the risk of cancer, the risk of cardiovascular issues, the risk of hypertension because you're trying to breathe harder. The warning on the box of the mask specifically states this product will not provide any protection against COVID-19, coronavirus, or other viruses. So why are our children being forced to wear these masks? I understand it's the governor. I understand we're going to lose funding. But you know what? At what point does human step up and have common sense? I have common sense. My daughter is she's not going to wear a mask to school. She doesn't wear one now when she attends school, and she's certainly not going to wear one in school. Those under 70 that contract COVID have a 99% chance of survival. Those over 70 have a 95% chance of survival. Yet, we're trying to push a vaccine that is not a vaccine on the public. There are 5 requirements for a vaccine to be considered as such. Requirement number 1, provides immunity to the virus. Doesn't happen. Requirement number 2, it protects recipients from getting the virus. Nope, failed. Requirement number 3, reduces the death from the virus. No, that didn't happen either. Requirement number 4, reduces circulation of the virus. Did not happen. Requirement number 5.
You just want to finish up now?
Really, Lee? You are one of the most disrespectful people
I'm
that I've
not,
ever
no,
come
you
across
are
in my
being
life.
disrespectful.
You are.
I'm just trying, I can't
Okay.
do it for you and not do for someone else, so everyone
You
has
know,
to.
I'm really confident that.
Okay, I'm not, listen, it's 2022.
Don't talk to me that
Don't
way.
talk to me like that. I'm tired of you people being so disrespectful. I am tired of your bullies. You
Do
group
not
together and a bully.
talk to me that way.
Don't
I'm
talk
not
to me that way.
elite at this
3
school.
minutes, stop it.
Lee, he can't talk
3
You are
minutes
one
is
of
up.
the rudest people I've ever come across, Lee. And you know what? You left out under God. I'll never forget that. You left it out in the pledge. You should step down. You are the worst president. I don't know how you got voted. You're disgusting.
Thank you. Thank you. Number 2. The language. Number 2. Number 3.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I have some questions in regards to the test to stay policy that was recently posted last night. In regards to the qualifying school exposure, it states the exposure must have occurred in a school setting and while both the person with COVID-19, the index patient, and the exposed person were consistently and properly masked. If they were properly masked, can anybody tell me why this is necessary if I thought the mask worked to stop spread? Do we know? Do you have any answer to that?
Are you asking about the test to stay policy, Jackie? I missed
Yeah,
that
about the
beginning.
test to stay policy. It's saying if they were properly masked, the person who's exposed has to quarantine. But masks work, right? I mean, isn't that what we go on? So if it's supposed to work to stop the spread, why does that person have to quarantine? Do we know? No? Okay. All right, I have a few other questions about it. In an email that we received from Ms. Santo on, actually 2 of them, January 7th, January 9th, quarantine period was changed to 5 days. So why is a test to stay policy to have your child tested 3 times over 7 days when, if you don't agree to it, you could just keep your child home for 5 days? Do we have,
That
It's a
I
little
can
confusing.
answer for you.
Okay.
The New York State Department of Health actually rescinded their test to stay original document, and it will be providing an updated document that looks at these newer quarantine rules.
which one did they revise? The 7 days or the?
They rescinded the test to stay policy. You'll notice that it wasn't on the agenda tonight because they have not given us updated guidance yet.
Okay, so there's going to be a change to that. Okay. There was a little bit of confusion there. Now, another thing about that is, another part said that in accordance with the New York State Department of Health and Suffolk County Department of Health, if you actually agree to the test to stay, you are expected to quarantine your child outside of school instruction. Am I reading that right? That you're expected to basically keep your child home and they are only allowed to go to school? Is that what you're agreeing to?
That's what the policy was originally.
So we're actually trying to tell parents their child cannot leave the house if they're not in school, if they agree to this. And what if they do? What if they're caught outside of school, say during a test to say period, they're caught in a store? Is there any kind of, I don't think that sounds crazy.
They rescinded that guidance, Jackie, so you're reading old guidance.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
They rescinded that guidance. The guidance that you're discussing, they rescinded.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to say is that it is a very sad day for Connecticut parent who advocates for our students and parental choice to have to call Suffolk County Police Department to report a board member who is working with community members to harass and try to intimidate me. I'm a parent, I'm a mother. I have the same rights as every other parent in this district to speak up for my children, and I should not have to worry about being bullied into silence. We, the community, have already witnessed how far some are willing to go to bully others into silence, but to call my place of employment, or to go after a parent's livelihood and then try to rally parents in the district that you're friends with to do the same in some backdoor dealings is a disgrace. How about instead of worrying about silencing me, I'm just one parent, focus on the mess and the lack of communication given to our community and parents. We have seen there's a massive lack of transparency between executive, everything that's coming out, that everything, that's what the focus needs to be. It should not be to actually call a parent's place of employment so that they actually have to file a report with the police for harassment. I suggest that you change how things are done. Thank you.
Four?
I have a question to follow up on what was just said. So the test to stay was supposed to be on the agenda, but was rescinded because the protocols are being changed. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay. So I'm assuming at some point, maybe the next meeting or the meeting after that, that whatever test to stay information will appear on the agenda as well? Okay. I'm going to ask if when that test to stay policy is on the agenda, as a community, I think we would also like to know what would the penalties be exactly, like dollar amounts, if the school district were to not follow the test to stay policy.
Districts are allowed to make that decision, and if the district decided not to test to stay, then the child would have to be quarantined. It's really to keep children in class.
I'm sorry, so I'm not sure I understood what you said.
So if the district decided not to take the policy of test to stay,
Okay.
then the child would have to be quarantined.
The same way we're doing right now?
Correct.
The same way things are happening right now?
The test to stay protocol is to keep the child in class and test to make sure that they're safe to stay in class. So they'd be staying in school, whereas now they would have to be quarantined.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion so carried. Good night, everyone. Where's she going? I'll do this.